Welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving deep into one of the most iconic action-adventure films of the early 2000s. A movie that took a beloved video game character and brought her to life on the big screen in a way no one had ever done before. We are talking about Lara Croft, Tomb Raider, released in the year 2001. This film holds a very special place in cinema history, not just as a video game adaptation but as a landmark moment for female-led action films in Hollywood. So sit back, because today we are covering everything. The overview, the full plot breakdown, the cast, the release details, the production, and a whole lot more. Let us get into it. Overview: where this movie comes from and who made it. Lara Croft, Tomb Raider is a 2001 action-adventure film directed by Simon West, with the screenplay written by Patrick Massett and John Zinman. The story was originally conceived by Sarah B. Cooper, Mike Werb, and Michael Colleary, with an adaptation also handled by Simon West himself. The film is based on the Tomb Raider video game series created by Core Design, a British game development studio that first introduced Lara Croft to the world in 1996. It is very important to understand where this character came from before talking about the film itself. Lara Croft was not born in Hollywood. She was born inside a video game. The Tomb Raider game series was a massive global phenomenon throughout the late 1990s, and Lara Croft became one of the most recognized fictional characters on the planet. She appeared on magazine covers, in major advertising campaigns, and was celebrated as a groundbreaking female protagonist in interactive entertainment. So when Hollywood finally decided to bring her to the big screen, the pressure and the expectations were absolutely enormous. The film was produced by Lawrence Gordon, Lloyd Levin, and Colin Wilson. The production companies involved included Paramount Pictures, Mutual Film Company, Lawrence Gordon Productions, Eidos Interactive, Telemunchen Group, BBC Films, Marubeni, and Toho Tawa. Paramount Pictures handled distribution across the United States and United Kingdom. The cinematography was the work of Peter Menzies Jr., the editing was done by Glenn Scantlebury and Dallas S. Poot, and the original music score was composed by Graham Revell, whose atmospheric and powerful compositions added tremendous energy to the film's action sequences and emotional moments alike. Simon West was not a newcomer when he stepped into the director's chair for this project. He was already known for directing high-energy Hollywood blockbusters, and he brought that exact sensibility to Tomb Raider. It is worth noting that Stephen Herek was originally attached to direct this film, but he departed the project to work on Rockstar instead, which is how Simon West ultimately came on board. That decision would prove to be a defining one for the film's overall tone and visual style. The production was a genuinely international undertaking. The film was shot across multiple countries using real-world locations that gave the story an authentic global scope. The exterior of Lara Croft's ancestral mansion was filmed at Hatfield House in Hatfield, north of London, a historically significant estate that has appeared in numerous major productions over the decades. The ancient temple sequences, some of the most visually stunning in the entire film, were shot at the real Ta Prohm Temple complex in Siem Reap, Cambodia, which is part of the legendary Angkor Wat archaeological site. Additional filming took place on the Vatnajökull Glacier in Iceland, and several prominent London locations including 10 Trinity Square and the Old Naval College in Greenwich were also used throughout the production. This combination of real locations on multiple continents gave the film a texture and authenticity that pure studio work could never have achieved. Plot: the full story breakdown. Now let us talk about the story of the film in full detail so you completely understand what happens from beginning to end. The film opens with Lara Croft, played by Angelina Jolie, inside what appears to be an Egyptian tomb, seeking a diamond at one end of a chamber. As she approaches, she is attacked by a large robot. After an intense chase and brutal battle, she disables it by ripping out its motivational circuits. She retrieves the diamond, which turns out to be a memory card labeled Lara's Party Mix, and she inserts it into a laptop inside the robot, which then starts playing music. The entire scene is then revealed to have taken place inside a training arena built within Lara's own home, and her tech assistant Bryce, played by Noah Taylor, was the one who programmed the robot to challenge her. It is a brilliant opening. Funny, thrilling, and immediately character-defining. You know exactly who Lara Croft is within the first 5 minutes. From there, the story shifts into its central premise. A once-in-5,000 years planetary alignment is approaching, culminating in a rare solar eclipse that will only occur for a matter of minutes. This cosmic event is the engine that drives everything in the plot. An ancient and all-powerful artifact known as the Triangle of Light, when activated during this planetary alignment, grants its user the ability to control time itself. The power to rewind, alter, and reshape history. Whoever controls the triangle controls everything. The artifact is not whole. It has been broken into 2 separate pieces and hidden in 2 different locations across the world by ancient civilizations who understood the danger of keeping it intact. As long as the 2 pieces remain separated, no one can use its power. But a shadowy and centuries-old secret society known as the Illuminati has been waiting patiently for this alignment, and now that it is approaching, they are moving to collect both pieces before the window closes forever. Lara Croft is drawn into this conflict when she discovers a hidden clock inside her family mansion. The clock was left there by her late father, Lord Richard Croft, who was himself an accomplished archaeologist and a man who clearly knew more about the Triangle of Light than he ever revealed during his lifetime. The clock is ticking down to the moment of the planetary alignment, and its discovery sets Lara on a path that will take her across the world and into the heart of a conspiracy that threatens everything. The villain at the center of this conspiracy is Manfred Powell, played by Ian Glenn. Powell is an Illuminati operative, a highly intelligent and ruthless man who has dedicated himself to retrieving the Triangle and delivering its power to the society he serves. He is calculating, articulate, and genuinely dangerous, and Ian Glenn plays him with a cold confidence that makes him a compelling and credible antagonist throughout the film. Lara travels first to Cambodia, where one half of the triangle is hidden within an ancient and crumbling temple buried deep in the jungle. The sequence set in Cambodia is one of the film's highlights, featuring extraordinary location photography, creative action choreography, and a genuine sense of archaeological wonder as Lara navigates the traps and chambers of the ancient site. She retrieves the first piece, but Powell and his men are close behind, and the confrontation between them establishes the high-stakes nature of their rivalry. The trail then leads to the frozen wilderness of Siberia, where the second half of the triangle has been concealed within another ancient structure hidden beneath the ice. This sequence brings an entirely different visual palette to the film, replacing the lush greens of Cambodia with stark whites and grays, and the contrast works beautifully in terms of the film's overall visual storytelling. Throughout her journey, Lara is forced to work alongside Alex West, played by Daniel Craig. Alex is a fellow adventurer and tomb raider, charming and skilled but morally flexible, and he has been working with Powell and the Illuminati in exchange for a cut of whatever treasure they find. His history with Lara is clearly complicated and romantic, and their scenes together crackle with tension and chemistry. Daniel Craig brings considerable presence to the role, and even in this relatively early stage of his career, his ability to hold the screen against Jolie is evident. The emotional core of the entire story, however, is the relationship between Lara and her father. Lord Richard Croft, played by Jon Voight, Angelina Jolie's real-life father, appears to Lara through visions and memories throughout the film. He knew about the triangle, he understood its danger, and the clues he left behind for his daughter are what guide her through the mission. Their bond, separated by death but maintained through love and memory, gives the film genuine emotional resonance beyond all the action and spectacle. The single scene in which they appear together on screen carries a weight that is difficult to fully put into words, partly because of the real-world dynamic between the 2 actors themselves. The climax of the film brings all of these threads together in Siberia, where Lara, Powell, and Alex all converge on the location of the second piece. The triangle is assembled, the alignment occurs, and in a moment of devastating temptation, Lara is offered the chance to use the triangle's power to bring her father back to life. It is the cruelest possible test of her character, and the choice she makes in that moment tells you everything about who she truly is. She chooses to let him go. She chooses to destroy the triangle rather than bend the fabric of time for her own personal grief. It is a genuinely moving conclusion, and it elevates the film beyond a simple action blockbuster into something with a real emotional statement at its heart. Cast: who played who? The cast assembled for this film is exceptional, and many of the actors involved would go on to define the next 2 decades of cinema and television. Angelina Jolie plays Lara Croft. Jon Voight plays Lord Richard Croft, Lara's father. Ian Glenn plays Manfred Powell, the primary villain. Daniel Craig plays Alex West, the rival adventurer. Noah Taylor plays Bryce, Lara's tech-savvy assistant. Chris Berry plays Hillary, Lara's loyal butler. Julian Rhind-Tutt plays Pims, Powell's associate. Richard Johnson plays a character identified as the distinguished gentleman. Leslie Phillips plays Wilson. Angelina Jolie as Lara Croft is the absolute centerpiece of this film, and it is impossible to imagine anyone else in the role. She trained intensively for months to prepare for the physical demands of the part, learning new combat techniques, weapons handling, and stunts. She even learned to play bungee ballet, a sequence that appears in the film and became one of its most iconic images. Critics who found fault with almost everything else in the film consistently agreed that Jolie herself was perfect in the role. She brought intelligence, physical authority, genuine wit, and an aristocratic elegance to Lara Croft that felt completely authentic and completely cinematic. Her performance is the reason the film works as well as it does. Jon Voight and Angelina Jolie share only one scene together in the entire film, but that scene is quietly one of the most powerful moments in it. Their real-life relationship as father and daughter, which was publicly known to be complicated and strained at the time, adds a layer of genuine emotion to their on-screen dynamic that no amount of scripting could manufacture. Daniel Craig as Alex West is a fascinating piece of casting in retrospect. At the time, he was a respected British actor but not yet the global superstar he would become. Just 5 years after Tomb Raider, he was cast as James Bond in Casino Royale in 2006, a role that would define his career. Watching him here as a secondary action hero and rival to Lara Croft is genuinely interesting with the benefit of hindsight. Ian Glenn and Noah Taylor, both of whom appear prominently in this film, would later become well known to a new generation of audiences through their roles in Game of Thrones. Glenn became famous as Jorah Mormont, and Taylor played the memorable character Locke. Tomb Raider was essentially a gathering of extraordinary talent that the world had not yet fully recognized. Release date and box office. The film was released in the United States on June 15, 2001. It opened in Germany on June 28, 2001, in the United Kingdom on July 6, 2001, and in Japan on October 6, 2001. The runtime of the film is 100 minutes, and it carries a PG-13 rating. The production budget was $115 million, which was a substantial investment for the time and reflected the studio's confidence in the material and the star. That confidence was rewarded. Lara Croft, Tomb Raider grossed $274,703,340 worldwide, making it a very significant commercial success. On its opening weekend alone, the film debuted at number 1 with $48.2 million, beating out Atlantis, The Lost Empire, and Shrek, both of which were major releases competing for the same audience that weekend. That opening weekend performance was one of the biggest of that entire summer season and demonstrated the enormous global appetite for this character and this story. Critically, the reception was more divided. The film earned a 19% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes, with critics finding fault in the plot and the pacing while consistently praising Angelina Jolie's performance. The audience response, however, was far warmer, and the box office numbers speak clearly to the disconnect that can exist between critical consensus and genuine public enthusiasm. The film's success had a profound impact on the Tomb Raider video game franchise as well. Eidos Interactive significantly increased the marketing budgets for subsequent game releases following the film's performance, and Jolie's physical interpretation of Lara Croft directly influenced the character's design in later video game installments. The film and the games became mutually reinforcing cultural artifacts throughout the early 2000s. A sequel, Lara Croft, Tomb Raider, The Cradle of Life, was released in 2003. Daniel Craig chose not to return for the sequel, and instead starred in The Mother. The sequel performed modestly but did not match the commercial success of the original. Trailer and promotional campaign. The marketing campaign for Lara Croft, Tomb Raider was one of the biggest and most visible of the 2001 summer season. The trailers were genuinely spectacular, featuring Angelina Jolie in the iconic duo pistol pose, sweeping aerial shots of the Cambodian temple locations, the extraordinary bungee ballet sequence inside the Croft mansion, and intense combat footage that promised audiences exactly the kind of grand action-adventure spectacle they were hoping for. Jolie appeared on the covers of countless major magazines in the lead-up to release, and the image of her as Lara Croft became one of the defining visual moments of that cultural moment. The promotional campaign understood perfectly what it was selling and delivered that message with enormous confidence and style. Lara's screen appearance in the film, featuring her signature braided hair, khaki shorts, and fitted tank tops, became instantly iconic. The aesthetic she presented on screen resonated far beyond cinema, influencing fashion, costume design, and popular culture in ways that are still felt today. The Lara Croft look became a cultural shorthand for independence, adventure, and strength, and it has remained in the cultural vocabulary for more than 2 decades since the film's release. Legacy. Lara Croft, Tomb Raider is a film that carries genuine historical significance. Whatever its critical limitations, it proved something that Hollywood had been reluctant to fully accept, which is that a female action hero could lead a major blockbuster to the top of the global box office. It opened doors. It changed the conversation about what kinds of stories could be told with women at the center of them. And it gave an entire generation of audiences a female icon who was brilliant, fearless, physically powerful, and entirely her own person. Angelina Jolie's performance remains one of the most celebrated portrayals of a video game character in the history of cinema. The film helped transform her from a respected dramatic actress into one of the most bankable action stars on the planet, a status she would carry through the decade and beyond. The small detail that Lara's training robot in the opening sequence is named Simon, as a quiet tribute to director Simon West, is the kind of affectionate behind-the-scenes touch that fans of the film have always loved. It speaks to the spirit of the production as a whole, one that took its material seriously while never forgetting to have fun with it. Lara Croft, Tomb Raider is a product of its time in the best possible sense. It is big, bold, stylish, and entertaining, and it delivered a character to the world who deserved nothing less than the grandest possible cinematic treatment. Whatever you think of it as a film, its place in history is secure. That is everything you need to know about Lara Croft, Tomb Raider from 2001. A film produced across the United Kingdom, United States, Germany, Canada, and Japan, made by Paramount Pictures and Lawrence Gordon Productions, directed by Simon West, and carried entirely by the extraordinary performance of Angelina Jolie. If you have never seen it, it absolutely deserves a watch. And if you have seen it, hopefully this breakdown gave you a deeper appreciation for everything that went into making it. The opening, training in the mansion. The film begins in what appears to be an ancient Egyptian tomb. The atmosphere is dark, tense, and mysterious. Stone walls surround a long chamber, and at the far end sits a glittering diamond. Moving through this dangerous environment with absolute confidence and grace is Lara Croft, a young British woman dressed in her signature fitted black outfit, her dark hair pulled back in a braid, and 2 pistols holstered at her sides. She moves through the chamber with the ease of someone who has done this 1,000 times before, reading the environment, calculating every step, and staying alert to every possible threat. As she approaches the diamond, the ground begins to shake. From the shadows emerges an enormous mechanical robot, a towering machine of steel and hydraulics that charges toward her with terrifying speed and force. What follows is one of the most thrilling opening sequences in action cinema from that era. Lara runs, leaps, flips, and fights her way through the chamber. She uses every wall, pillar, and surface to her advantage, demonstrating a level of athleticism and spatial intelligence that borders on superhuman. The robot pursues her relentlessly, smashing through obstacles and adapting to her movements, but Lara stays one step ahead. Eventually, she gets close enough to reach inside its mechanical chest and rip out its core motivational circuits, shutting it down completely. She stands victorious over the disabled machine. She picks up the diamond, which turns out to be nothing more than a memory card with the words Lara's Party Mix written on it, and she slots it into a laptop computer built into the robot. Music starts playing. The camera pulls back and the entire illusion dissolves. The Egyptian tomb is revealed to be an elaborate training arena inside Lara's own ancestral mansion, a vast and extraordinary facility she has had built specifically for her combat and fitness preparation. Standing at a control panel nearby is Bryce, her young, slightly nerdy, and endlessly enthusiastic technical assistant, who grins as the music plays, proud of the challenge he programmed for her. The robot, it is revealed, is named Simon, a small tribute to the film's director Simon West. This opening tells you everything you need to know about Lara Croft. She is not just an action hero. She is a woman who treats life-threatening scenarios as a warm-up routine. She is brilliant, physically extraordinary, and has a sense of humor about all of it. She lives in a world of her own design, surrounded by ancient artifacts, advanced technology, and a small circle of trusted companions. And she is very, very good at what she does. The mansion and Lara's world. After the training session, we begin to get a proper look at Lara's life and her world. She lives in Croft Manor, a breathtaking ancestral estate in the English countryside. The mansion is enormous and immaculate, filled with priceless artifacts from dozens of civilizations and centuries. There are sculptures, relics, ancient weapons, and treasures from every corner of the globe, all collected by Lara and her family across generations. The place feels like a museum that someone also happens to live in, which in many ways is exactly what it is. Her household is looked after by Hilary, her devoted and slightly long-suffering butler, played by Chris Berry. Hilary is the kind of traditional English butler who maintains perfect composure in any situation, including the rather unusual situation of working for a woman who regularly trains with robots and returns home covered in the dust of ancient tombs. He is fond of Lara in a quietly paternal way, and she is fond of him in return, even if she rarely slows down enough to show it. Bryce lives and works in a converted trailer on the grounds of the estate, surrounded by computer equipment, monitors, and the general organized chaos of a technical genius who spends most of his time deep in problems that nobody else understands. He handles all of Lara's technical needs, from hacking into secure systems to building and maintaining the equipment she uses in the field. Their relationship is warm and easy, built on years of shared adventure and mutual respect. On the night following her training session, Lara is unable to sleep. She wanders the quiet halls of the mansion and finds herself drawn to a particular wall in one of the older rooms. Something about the wall feels wrong to her, slightly off in a way she cannot immediately identify. She begins to examine it and discovers that there is a hidden space behind the paneling. She breaks through and finds a concealed chamber that has clearly not been opened in many years. Inside the chamber, she finds a clock. Not an ordinary clock, but an ancient and intricately crafted device that appears to have been deliberately hidden. It is ticking, counting down to something. Lara does not yet know what that something is, but she knows immediately that this clock was left there intentionally, and she knows by whom. The clock was left by her father. Lara's father, the weight of the past. Lord Richard Croft was Lara's father, an archaeologist and adventurer of considerable reputation and ability. He died when Lara was very young, and his absence has shaped her entire life. She grew up in the shadow of his legacy, driven to surpass him, to understand him, and in some deep and unspoken way, to find him again through the work they both loved. She keeps his memory close. His photograph sits in her bedroom. His journals and papers fill shelves in the manor. Everything she is was built in part on the foundation of who he was. The clock she has found begins to feel increasingly significant as she examines it. It is clearly of great age, crafted with extraordinary precision, and it appears to be counting down to a specific moment in time. She consults her father's old research materials and begins to piece together what the clock is connected to. The answer leads her into one of the most extraordinary stories in ancient human history. The planetary alignment and the triangle of light. Approximately every 5,000 years, the planets of the solar system align in a configuration so rare and precise that it produces a brief but total solar eclipse on Earth. This alignment is not merely an astronomical curiosity. According to ancient legend and documented historical accounts that Lara's father had been investigating for years, this planetary alignment activates an artifact of immense and terrifying power known as the Triangle of Light. The Triangle of Light is not simply a treasure or a relic. It is a device, engineered by an ancient and advanced civilization, that during the moment of planetary alignment grants its user the ability to manipulate time. Complete control over time means the ability to undo events, reshape history, reverse deaths, change outcomes, and effectively rewrite the story of human civilization according to the wishes of whoever holds the triangle. It is, in practical terms, the most dangerous object that has ever existed. The ancient civilization that created the triangle understood its danger immediately. Recognizing that no single person or group could be trusted with such power, they broke the triangle into two separate pieces and hid each piece in a different location, separated by thousands of miles and concealed within structures and environments designed to make retrieval extraordinarily difficult. As long as the two pieces remained apart, the triangle was inert and harmless. But united during the precise window of the planetary alignment, its power would be absolute. The countdown to the next alignment has now begun. Lara's father knew this was coming, and he knew exactly how much danger it represented. He had been researching the triangle for years, quietly gathering evidence and information, trying to understand both the artifact's history and the intentions of the people who were also looking for it. Before he died, he hid the clock in the wall of Croft Manor as a message to his daughter, trusting that when the time came, she would find it, understand it, and do what needed to be done. The Illuminati, the enemy. The organization hunting the triangle is called the Illuminati. This is not a new organization. It has existed for centuries, a secretive and powerful society made up of some of the most influential men in the world. Bankers, politicians, industrialists, and intellectuals, bound together by a shared belief that power should be concentrated in the hands of those who are truly worthy of it, meaning themselves. The Illuminati have been waiting for this planetary alignment for generations, passing the knowledge down through their ranks and preparing methodically for the moment when they could finally retrieve the triangle and claim its power. Their primary agent in this operation is Manfred Powell, played with cold precision by Ian Glenn. Powell is a lawyer by profession but an Illuminati operative by vocation. He is articulate, controlled, and completely without conscience when it comes to achieving his objectives. He has been tasked by the Illuminati's leadership with locating and retrieving both pieces of the triangle before the alignment window closes, and he has assembled a team of soldiers, mercenaries, and specialists to help him do it. He is also, for reasons that will become clear, not entirely trustworthy even toward the organization he ostensibly serves. Alongside Powell in the field is Alex West, played by Daniel Craig. Alex is a fellow adventurer and tomb raider, American-born, charming, physically capable, and highly skilled. He has been hired by Powell to assist in the retrieval operation, motivated by the promise of a significant financial reward. Alex and Lara have a history together. They were close at some point in the past, romantically involved and professionally intertwined, but something happened between them that created distance and tension. What exactly went wrong is never fully spelled out, but the chemistry between them remains complicated and charged throughout the entire film. The break-in at Croft Manor. Lara begins her research into the clock and what it means, but she does not have much time before events force her hand. That same night, Croft Manor is invaded by a highly trained assault team. They come in the middle of the night, moving with the precision and equipment of professional military operatives, and their target is not Lara. Their target is the clock she found in the hidden room. What follows is one of the most inventive and entertaining action sequences in the film. Lara wakes to the sound of her home being breached and immediately swings into combat mode. She fights the invaders throughout the mansion, using everything around her as a weapon and an advantage. In a sequence that has become genuinely iconic, she bungee jumps from the upper levels of the mansion's grand interior, swinging on the cables to fight off attackers while suspended in the air, using her momentum and the architecture of her own home as tools in the battle. It is acrobatic, creative, and completely thrilling. Despite her best efforts, the assault team achieves their objective. They take the clock and retreat. Lara is left standing in her own home, slightly battered, watching her father's final message to her disappear into the night. She is furious, but she is also more determined than ever. She now knows that she is not the only one who has been looking for the triangle, and she knows that the people who just broke into her home are not amateurs. The race is on. The distinguished gentleman, advice from an unexpected source. In the aftermath of the break-in, Lara receives an unexpected visit from a figure identified only as the distinguished gentleman, played by Richard Johnson. He is clearly a man of considerable age, experience, and knowledge. He arrives at Croft Manor and speaks to Lara with the authority of someone who has been watching events from a distance for a very long time. He tells her what she has already begun to suspect. The clock was a key, a device connected to the triangle of light, and it has now been delivered to Manfred Powell, who intends to use it to find both pieces of the triangle before the alignment occurs. He explains the history of the Illuminati and their long obsession with the artifact. And he warns her about what will happen if Powell succeeds. What he also reveals, gently and with obvious care, is that her father knew all of this. Richard Croft had been deeply entangled in the history of the triangle and the Illuminati long before his death, and the clock in the wall was not simply a clue. It was his way of trusting his daughter with the most important task imaginable. The distinguished gentleman urges Lara to act, to find both pieces of the triangle herself before Powell can, and to ensure that the artifact is destroyed rather than used. This conversation crystallizes everything for Lara. This is no longer simply a retrieval mission or an adventure. This is her father's unfinished work, passed down to her across the years, and she will not let it fail. Cambodia, the first piece. Lara's research and the information she has gathered points her toward Cambodia. Specifically, toward the ancient temple complex in the jungle near Siem Reap, an area dominated by the extraordinary ruins of Angkor Wat and the surrounding archaeological sites. Hidden within one of these temples, one of the most extraordinary in the world, is the first half of the triangle. Lara travels to Cambodia and makes her way into the jungle. The temple she is looking for is Taprome, a structure that nature has been slowly reclaiming for centuries, its walls cracked and overgrown with enormous tree roots that have woven themselves through the stone like the fingers of a vast living hand. It is one of the most visually extraordinary places on Earth, and the film uses it to spectacular effect. Inside the temple, Lara navigates ancient chambers, solves architectural puzzles, and demonstrates the full range of her archaeological expertise. This is not simply someone smashing through walls looking for treasure. Lara reads the temple, understands its design and the intentions of the people who built it, and uses that understanding to find the path that was meant to be found by someone worthy of following it. The combination of physical ability and intellectual depth is what defines her as an adventurer, and the Cambodia sequence shows both qualities at their best. She finds the first piece of the triangle. But Powell and his team are right behind her. The confrontation inside the temple is intense and dangerous, and it becomes clear that Powell is not simply a wealthy eccentric chasing an artifact. He is a professional, and his people are willing to do whatever it takes. Alex West is present in the temple as well, and his presence creates additional tension. He is working with Powell, but his loyalty to that arrangement is clearly not unconditional when Lara is involved. The sequence ends with both parties in possession of a piece of the puzzle, but the second piece remains hidden, and the clock is ticking toward the alignment. The vision of her father. Throughout the film, Lara experiences visions of her father. These are not supernatural apparitions in any traditional sense, but rather moments in which her memory and grief and love coalesce into something vivid and present. She sees him as she remembers him, warm and intelligent and deeply proud of her, and in these visions he speaks to her, guides her, and reminds her of who she is and what she is capable of. These sequences are among the most emotionally powerful in the film. Jon Voight plays Lord Richard Croft with a quiet dignity and warmth that makes the character immediately sympathetic and believable. And knowing that Voight and Jolie are genuinely father and daughter in real life, with all the complexity and history that relationship carries, makes every shared moment between them resonate with something that goes beyond the script. When Lara reaches out to touch her father's face in a vision and the image dissolves, there is genuine sadness in Jolie's eyes that does not feel performed. Siberia, the second piece. The trail to the second piece of the triangle leads to Siberia, specifically to an ancient structure buried deep beneath the ice of a remote glacier. The contrast with Cambodia could not be more extreme. Where Cambodia was lush, green, humid, and alive with the sounds of the jungle, Siberia is vast, white, frozen, and almost completely silent. The environment itself feels hostile and indifferent, and the visual shift gives the film's second half a distinctly different and more austere atmosphere. Lara makes her way to the location, and once again Powell and his team are converging on the same point from a different direction. The ancient structure buried in the ice is extraordinary, a geometric chamber of impossible precision that predates any known civilization and clearly demonstrates a level of engineering knowledge that should not have existed when it was built. Within this chamber, the second piece of the triangle waits. Alex West is again present, and in Siberia his allegiance begins to shift in a way that complicates Powell's plans. Whatever hold Powell has over him weakens when the full scope of what Powell intends to do with the triangle becomes apparent. Alex is many things, morally flexible and financially motivated among them, but there are lines he is not willing to cross, and Powell's ambitions cross several of them. The recovery of the second piece happens almost simultaneously for both Lara and Powell, and the confrontation that follows is explosive and devastating. In the chaos of the battle inside the ice structure, Alex West makes a critical choice. He acts to help Lara rather than to serve Powell, and that choice costs him everything. He is killed. His death hits Lara hard. Whatever complicated history existed between them, whatever mixture of frustration and affection and unresolved feelings she carried for him, it was real, and losing him in that cold and remote place is a genuine loss. The assembly of the triangle and the moment of truth. Powell succeeds in bringing both pieces of the triangle together, and the planetary alignment arrives. The sky changes. The light shifts. The ancient geometric chamber responds to the cosmic event it was designed for, and the triangle of light is activated. What happens in the moment of activation is extraordinary. Time itself becomes fluid and strange. The past and the present blur together. And in this incredible and disorienting moment, Lara is offered something she could never have anticipated. She is offered the chance to bring her father back. Powell, understanding exactly what Lara wants more than anything in the world, uses the triangle's power to place her father before her. Richard Croft stands in front of his daughter, alive, warm, and real, just as she remembers him. The scene is heartbreaking. Everything Lara has ever wanted is standing right in front of her, and all she has to do is accept it. But her father speaks to her. Even in this reconstructed form, even in this moment of impossible reunion, Richard Croft is still himself. He tells her what she already knows in the deepest part of herself. That using the triangle is wrong. That the power it represents is too great and too dangerous for any person to wield. That his death was part of a story, and that stories cannot be rewritten without destroying everything that came after them. He tells her to let him go. It is the single most emotionally demanding moment in the entire film. Angelina Jolie plays it without a word, communicating everything through her expression and her body, the desperate desire to accept what is being offered and the equally powerful knowledge that she cannot. In the end, she chooses correctly. She destroys the triangle. The aftermath and the final confrontation. With the triangle destroyed, its power dissipates and the temporal anomaly collapses. Powell, furious and unhinged by the loss of everything he spent his life working toward, turns on Lara. What follows is the film's final fight sequence, a brutal and intense physical confrontation in the collapsing chamber. Lara defeats him. It is not a tidy or glamorous victory. It is hard-won, physical, and carries the emotional weight of everything that came before it. Lara walks away from the ruins of the Siberian structure with the pieces of the destroyed triangle. Powell is dead. The Illuminati's plan has failed. The alignment window has passed and will not return for another 5,000 years. The world is safe, though of course the world does not know how close it came to being something entirely different. She returns home to Croft Manor. The mansion is quiet. Bryce is there, and Hillary is there, and the familiar world of artifacts and history and organized chaos surrounds her again. But something is different. She is different. She went into this mission as an adventurer looking for a challenge and came out the other side as a daughter who had to say goodbye to her father a second time, and do it knowingly, and do it well. In the final moments of the film, Lara stands in the grounds of Croft Manor. The sky is clear and the estate stretches out around her, full of history and memory, and the accumulated weight of generations of Crofts who built and lived and lost in this place. She is at peace. Not happy exactly, but resolved. The grief is there, and it always will be, but it sits alongside something else now. Pride. The knowledge that when it mattered most, she made the right choice. And the quiet, steady certainty that wherever her next adventure leads, she is ready for it. That is the complete and detailed story of Lara Croft, Tomb Raider, from the very first frame to the very last. A story about an extraordinary woman, an impossible mission, an ancient power, and ultimately a daughter's love for her father, and the strength it takes to let someone go. It is action and adventure and spectacle, but underneath all of that, it is a story about grief, legacy, and what it truly means to be brave. The lives behind the characters, actor histories of Lara Croft, Tomb Raider, 2001. Angelina Jolie. Angelina Jolie was born on June 4, 1975, in Los Angeles, California. Her full name at birth was Angelina Jolie Voigt, and she was the daughter of actor Jon Voight and actress Mark-Ellen Bertrand. From the very beginning of her life, she was surrounded by the world of performance and creative expression, growing up in a household where acting was not simply a profession but a language through which people understood themselves and communicated with the world. Her parents separated when she was just a year old, and her mother raised her and her older brother James Haven largely on her own after the marriage ended. The absence of her father during her formative years created a wound that would quietly inform much of her personal and professional life for decades. As a child, Angelina was drawn to dark and dramatic things. She was not the kind of child who gravitated toward light entertainment or simple stories. She was fascinated by death, by complexity, by the full range of human experience, and those instincts expressed themselves early in a desire to become an actress. She enrolled at the Lee Strasberg Theater and Film Institute in New York as a young teenager, studying the method acting tradition that would later become central to her approach. She was serious about her craft from a very young age, and that seriousness set her apart from other young people who drifted in and out of the industry on the strength of their family connections. Her early life was genuinely difficult in ways that went beyond the ordinary challenges of growing up. She struggled with her sense of identity throughout her teenage years, feeling like an outsider in most of the environments she moved through. She had a complicated and sometimes painful relationship with her own body and her own emotions, and she was open in later interviews about having gone through periods of real darkness and self-destructive behavior. She found some stability and sense of purpose in acting, and also in a developing interest in knives and the aesthetics of danger, which raised eyebrows but also spoke to a genuine desire to engage with the more extreme edges of human experience. Her film career began quietly. She appeared in small roles and low-budget productions throughout the early 1990s, working steadily but not yet finding the role that would define her. She appeared in Hackers in 1995, a film that developed a cult following over time, and in which she demonstrated the kind of magnetic screen presence that would eventually make her one of the most recognizable women in the world. She was clearly someone worth watching, even in those early appearances where the material did not always match her potential. The breakthrough came in 1999 when she appeared in the HBO film Gia, a biographical drama about the tragic life of supermodel Gia Karangi. The performance was extraordinary. She threw herself into the role completely, portraying Karangi's beauty, vulnerability, addiction, and eventual death with a raw honesty that left viewers genuinely stunned. The performance earned her a Golden Globe Award and an Emmy nomination and announced to the industry that she was operating at a level far above what most of her contemporaries could reach. That same year she appeared in Girl, Interrupted, playing the volatile and fascinating Lisa Rowe opposite Winona Ryder. The film required her to be magnetic and dangerous simultaneously, to draw the audience toward a character who was genuinely destructive, and she did it so effectively that the performance earned her the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress in 2000. She was 24 years old. Her speech at the ceremony became one of the most talked about moments of that award season, partly for its content and partly for its raw emotional honesty, which felt completely different from the polished gratitude that typically characterized those moments. By the time she was cast as Lara Croft in Tomb Raider, she was already one of the most discussed and written about actresses in Hollywood, though for reasons that were as much personal as professional. Her marriages, first to Johnny Lee Miller and then to actor Billy Bob Thornton, were tabloid fixtures. Her relationship with Thornton was particularly intense and public, characterized by a mutual obsession that played out in the press in ways that fascinated and sometimes alarmed outside observers. They divorced in 2003. For Tomb Raider, she trained with extraordinary dedication. She worked with weapons instructors, combat specialists, and physical trainers for months before filming began. She learned to handle the twin pistols that are Lara Croft's signature weapons with genuine proficiency. She mastered the bungee ballet sequence that appears in the film. She built significant muscle and physical capability that transformed her already striking appearance into something that matched the demands of the role. She also worked specifically on the English accent Lara Croft required, refining it until it was completely convincing. Her commitment to the physical and technical preparation was total. The film transformed her career in ways that even her Oscar win had not fully achieved. She became an action star, a category that very few women had ever successfully occupied at the level of major Hollywood blockbusters. The image of her as Lara Croft became one of the defining images of early 2000s popular culture, and the global recognition it brought her was of a different scale and character from anything that had come before. In the years following Tomb Raider, her personal life continued to generate enormous public attention. She adopted her first child, Maddox, from Cambodia in 2002, a decision that reflected both her growing humanitarian awareness and a genuine desire to build a family on her own terms. This was followed by the adoption of Zahara from Ethiopia in 2005 and Pax from Vietnam in 2007, alongside biological children with actor Brad Pitt, with whom she began a relationship in 2005 after they met on the set of Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Shiloh was born in 2006, followed by twins Knox and Vivian in 2008. The family, eventually comprising 6 children, became one of the most publicized in the world. Her relationship with Brad Pitt, known widely as Brangelina in the tabloid press, dominated entertainment coverage for more than a decade. They married in 2014 and announced their separation in 2016, a split that became one of the most extensively covered celebrity events in recent memory, and that has continued to generate legal and personal disputes well beyond the initial separation. Throughout this period, she was also building a significant humanitarian career. She became a Goodwill Ambassador for the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in 2001, a role that took her to conflict zones and refugee camps around the world and that she pursued with a seriousness and commitment that went far beyond celebrity advocacy. She visited dozens of countries, met with displaced populations, lobbied governments, and used her platform to advocate for people who had no other voice. She was eventually promoted to Special Envoy for the UNHCR, a position that carries greater diplomatic weight and responsibility. Her acting career continued with a remarkable range of work. She appeared in films including Beyond Borders, Taking Lives, Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, A Mighty Heart, Changeling, Wanted, Salt, The Tourist, Maleficent, and By the Sea, among many others. Her performance in Changeling earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. Her portrayal of Maleficent in the Disney fantasy film became another iconic performance that introduced her to a new generation of fans and spawned a successful sequel. She also moved into directing, making her feature directorial debut with In the Land of Blood and Honey in 2011, a film about the Bosnian War that she wrote and directed. She followed it with Unbroken in 2014 and First They Killed My Father in 2017. The latter being a deeply personal film about the Khmer Rouge genocide in Cambodia, a country she has a profound connection to through her son Maddox and her extensive humanitarian work there. Her relationship with her father John Voight remained complex and unresolved for many years. They were estranged for a significant period, and the public nature of their difficulties added an additional layer to every film project in which they appeared together, including Tomb Raider, where their on-screen relationship as father and daughter carried unmistakable real-world resonance. In later years, they reconciled to a degree, and Voight has spoken warmly about his daughter in public contexts, though the full nature of their private relationship remains something only they truly know. Angelina Jolie is one of the most significant cultural figures of the past 3 decades. She is an Academy Award-winning actress, a filmmaker, a humanitarian, a mother, and a woman who has consistently refused to conform to anyone else's definition of what she should be or how she should live. Her life has been lived at a scale and intensity that most people experience only through fiction, and the complexity and richness of that life has always found its way into her work, making her performances feel like something more than performance. She remains one of the most compelling and fascinating people in the world of film. Jon Voight. Jon Voight was born on December 29, 1938, in Yonkers, New York. He grew up in a middle-class family with strong roots in both European heritage and American working-class values. His father was a golf professional of Czech and Slovak descent, and the family moved around during his childhood in connection with his father's career. Jon was the middle of three brothers, and from early in his life he showed a strong inclination toward performance and storytelling. He pursued his interest in acting with considerable seriousness, studying at the Catholic University of America in Washington and later training at the Neighborhood Playhouse School of the Theater in New York, one of the most prestigious acting schools in the country. His training was rigorous and classical, grounding him in a tradition of craft and discipline that would characterize his work throughout his career. His early career was built in the theater and in small television appearances, the typical path for serious young actors in New York during the 1960s. He worked steadily and built a reputation as a skilled and committed performer, but the big break was yet to come. When it came in extraordinary fashion. In 1969, Jon Voight starred in Midnight Cowboy, directed by John Schlesinger. He played Joe Buck, a naive young man from Texas who travels to New York City convinced he can make a living as a gigolo, only to find himself descending into poverty and forming an unlikely and deeply moving friendship with a small-time con man named Ratso Rizzo, played by Dustin Hoffman. The film was a landmark of American cinema, raw and honest in a way that Hollywood films of the time rarely were, and Voight's performance was at its center. He was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Actor and became, essentially overnight, one of the most discussed and admired young actors in Hollywood. The film was rated X at the time of its initial release, a rating that was later revised, and the fact that it won the Academy Award for Best Picture despite that rating spoke to the extraordinary quality of the work and the changing cultural landscape of American cinema in the late 1960s. Voight's performance was fearless. Joe Buck is a character who is simultaneously ridiculous and heartbreaking, and the ability to hold both of those qualities in the same breath without letting either one overwhelm the other is a significant acting achievement. He followed Midnight Cowboy with a series of strong and varied performances throughout the early 1970s. He appeared in Deliverance in 1972, one of the most intense and disturbing American films of that decade, playing Ed Gentry, an ordinary suburban man confronted with extreme violence in the wilderness of the American South. The film was a massive critical and commercial success, and Voight's measured and emotionally honest performance anchored it against the more visceral elements of the story. In 1978, he won the Academy Award for Best Actor for his performance in Coming Home, a film about a paraplegic Vietnam veteran and his relationship with a woman whose husband is still serving overseas. The performance required enormous physical and emotional commitment, and Voight delivered a portrayal that was genuinely moving and technically masterful. It remains one of the finest performances in American cinema of the 1970s, a decade that was extraordinarily rich in great acting. His personal life during this period included his marriage to actress Markellen Bertrand, with whom he had two children, James Haven and Angelina Jolie. The marriage did not last. They separated when Angelina was just 1 year old, and Voight was largely absent from his children's lives during their formative years. This absence would have profound consequences, both personally and professionally, particularly in his relationship with Angelina, who grew up feeling abandoned by her father and who would carry that wound for many years. His career in the 1980s was somewhat less consistent than the extraordinary run of the 1970s, though he continued to work steadily and appeared in several interesting projects. He reinvented himself somewhat in the 1990s, taking on more villainous and character-driven roles that demonstrated a different dimension of his abilities. He appeared in Heat, the Michael Mann crime epic, in a small but memorable role. He played the villain Howard Saint in Runaway Train and delivered one of his most celebrated later performances as the real-life football coach Bear Bryant in the television film The Junction Boys. His performance in Ray Donovan, the Showtime drama series in which he played the volatile and dangerous Mickey Donovan, earned him considerable praise in the later phase of his career and introduced him to a new generation of television audiences. His relationship with his daughter Angelina became one of the most publicly discussed aspects of both their lives. They were estranged for significant periods, and both spoke about their difficulties in public in ways that created media controversy on multiple occasions. When they appeared together in Tomb Raider in 2001, the combination of their real estrangement and the on-screen story of a father and daughter separated by death created a genuinely charged emotional atmosphere around their single shared scene that no director could have manufactured through craft alone. Jon Voight is an actor of extraordinary ability and range, whose career spans more than 6 decades and includes some of the most celebrated performances in American film history. His personal life has been complicated and public, and his political views, which became increasingly vocal in the later years of his career, generated significant controversy. But his work as an actor remains a testament to what the craft can achieve when pursued with genuine dedication and intelligence. Daniel Craig. Daniel Craig was born on March 2, 1968, in Chester, England. He grew up in a household that was relatively ordinary by the standards of the acting world. His father was a pub landlord and his mother was an art teacher, and Daniel spent his early years in the northwest of England before his parents separated and he moved with his mother to Liverpool. Liverpool in the 1970s and early 1980s was a city with a strong cultural identity and a rich tradition of music, theater, and working-class storytelling, and those influences shaped Daniel in ways that would become apparent in his acting. He discovered theater as a teenager and found in it a sense of purpose and belonging that little else provided. He was not a conventional student, and the academic path held limited appeal for him, but performance was different. He auditioned for the National Youth Theatre at the age of 16 and was accepted, which was the first significant external validation of his talent and the beginning of a serious commitment to the craft. He went on to train at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama in London, one of the most demanding and prestigious drama schools in the country. His training was intensive and classical, covering everything from Shakespeare to contemporary drama, and it gave him a technical foundation that would serve him throughout his career. He graduated in the early 1990s and began the slow and steady process of building a career in the British theatre and film industry. His early career was characterized by solid, respected work rather than sudden stardom. He appeared in theater productions, television dramas, and small film roles throughout the 1990s, building a reputation as a serious and reliable actor with considerable range. He was not a household name, but within the industry he was well regarded. His work in the British television series Our Friends in the North in 1996, in which he played one of 4 friends navigating life in Newcastle from the 1960s to the 1990s, was particularly praised and remains one of the finest examples of British television drama from that era. His film career began to gain momentum in the late 1990s. He appeared in Elizabeth in 1998, the historical drama about the early reign of Queen Elizabeth I, in a small but striking role. He appeared in Love is the Devil in the same year, playing the real-life painter Francis Bacon's lover George Dyer in a film that required considerable psychological depth and physical commitment. These performances established him as an actor capable of inhabiting complex and morally ambiguous characters with complete conviction. When he was cast in Lara Croft, Tomb Raider as Alex West, he was still far from being a globally recognized name. He was a respected British actor working at a mid-level of the international film industry, and the role of Alex West was a significant step up in terms of budget and visibility. He brought to the role a natural physical authority and a kind of cool, slightly dangerous charm that made Alex West genuinely compelling rather than simply a convenient plot device. His scenes with Angelina Jolie crackle with the kind of energy that comes from two technically accomplished actors who are both fully committed to what they are doing. After Tomb Raider, he continued to build his career with a series of increasingly strong film and television performances. He appeared in Road to Perdition in 2002, the Sam Mendes-directed crime film starring Tom Hanks, in a memorably sinister supporting role as a hired killer. He appeared in Layer Cake in 2004, a British crime thriller in which he played the lead role, a cocaine dealer trying to navigate his way out of the criminal world. His performance in Layer Cake was widely praised and is generally credited as one of the key factors in his being seriously considered for the role that would change everything. In 2005, it was announced that Daniel Craig had been cast as James Bond, the sixth actor to officially play the role in the Ian Productions series. The announcement was met with considerable public skepticism. He was not the kind of actor people typically associated with Bond. He was blonde, which broke with the dark-haired tradition of the role. He was seen by some as too rough and too serious for a character associated with suave elegance. An online petition was organized against his casting, which, in retrospect, is one of cinema history's more embarrassing collective misjudgments. Casino Royale, released in 2006, was a revelation. Craig's Bond was unlike any previous interpretation of the character. He brought a rawness, a physicality, and an emotional vulnerability to the role that transformed Bond from an archetype into a human being. The film was a massive critical and commercial success, and Craig's performance was universally praised, silencing every skeptic and earning him a place in the very top rank of actors who have defined that legendary character. He went on to play Bond in Quantum of Solace in 2008, Skyfall in 2012, Spectre in 2015, and No Time to Die in 2021, with Skyfall in particular being considered one of the finest Bond films ever made. Outside of Bond, he appeared in a wide range of projects that demonstrated the full breadth of his ability. His performance in the American adaptation of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo in 2011, directed by David Fincher, was critically acclaimed. His appearances in Steven Spielberg's Munich and in the Steven Soderbergh heist comedy Logan Lucky showed his range across different genres and tones. His performance in Knives Out in 2019, playing the flamboyant Southern detective Benoit Blanc, revealed a gift for comedy and self-aware performance that surprised many people and delighted audiences. He reprised the role in Glass Onion in 2022. Daniel Craig is married to actress Rachel Weisz, whom he met on the set of Dream House in 2011. They married quietly in 2011 and have a daughter together. He also has a daughter from a previous relationship with actress Fiona Loudon. His personal life has been notably private compared to many actors of his profile, which is a reflection of a general preference for keeping the work separate from the public image. He stands as one of the most accomplished British actors of his generation, a man who built his career slowly and seriously and who has consistently chosen work that challenges him rather than simply rewards him. His journey from a pub landlord's son in Chester to one of the most iconic action heroes in cinema history is a story of genuine talent matched with genuine determination. Ian Glen. Ian Glen was born on June 24, 1961, in Edinburgh, Scotland. He grew up in Scotland and developed an early passion for performance that led him toward a rigorous formal training in acting. He studied at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in London, one of the most prestigious drama schools in the world, where he trained alongside many of the actors who would go on to define British theatre and film in the following decades. His early career was built primarily in the theatre, where he established himself as a classical actor of considerable ability. He worked with major British theatre companies and appeared in productions that demonstrated a range and depth that marked him out as someone the industry should watch closely. Theatre in Britain in the 1980s was a rich and serious world, and Glen immersed himself in it completely, developing the technical foundation that would serve him throughout his career. His film career began to develop in the late 1980s and accelerated through the 1990s. He appeared in Mountains of the Moon in 1990, playing the explorer Richard Francis Burton in a biographical adventure film that required both physical presence and intellectual depth. The performance was widely praised and introduced him to international audiences for the first time. He appeared in Fools of Fortune in 1990 and in The Young Americans in 1993, and throughout this period he was building a reputation as an actor who could anchor serious dramatic material with complete authority. One of the most significant moments of his early career came with his nomination for a BAFTA award for his performance in the film Silent Scream in 1990. The film was a Scottish prison drama of considerable intensity, and his performance demonstrated the kind of commitment to difficult and uncomfortable material that would characterize the best of his later work. His role as Manfred Powell in Lara Croft, Tomb Raider gave him a level of global visibility that his previous work, excellent as it was, had not provided. Powell is a villain of genuine intelligence and menace, and Glenn played him with the kind of controlled intensity that makes a villain truly frightening rather than merely theatrical. The role required him to be simultaneously charming and ruthless, to present a surface of civilized sophistication that barely conceals the cold and calculating nature underneath, and he achieved that balance with considerable skill. The role that would define his career for a new generation came when he was cast as Ser Jorah Mormont in Game of Thrones, the HBO fantasy series that became a global cultural phenomenon. Jorah Mormont is one of the most beloved characters in the series, a disgraced knight who serves as advisor and protector to Daenerys Targaryen, and whose complicated feelings for her form one of the show's most enduring emotional threads. Glenn played the character across all 8 seasons of the show, from 2011 to 2019, and his portrayal of Jorah's loyalty, his shame, his unrequited love, and his ultimate sacrifice earned him enormous affection from audiences worldwide. The combination of his classical theater training, his film work, and his long run on one of the most watched television series in history has made Ian Glenn one of the most respected and recognizable British actors of his generation. He has continued to work extensively in film and television throughout his career and remains a presence of considerable authority and craft in everything he appears in. Noah Taylor. Noah Taylor was born on September 4, 1969, in London, England, though he grew up in Australia after his family emigrated when he was a child. His upbringing in Australia gave him a perspective and sensibility that distinguished him from many of his British contemporaries, and he developed an early interest in acting that led him toward the Australian film industry as a young man. His breakthrough came with the Australian film The Year My Voice Broke in 1987, in which he played a teenage boy navigating the complications of adolescence, first love, and growing up in a small town. The film was a critical success, and his performance was singled out for particular praise. He followed it with Flirting in 1991, a sequel of sorts, and again his performance was warmly received. These 2 films established him as one of the most promising young actors in Australian cinema. His international career developed through the 1990s as he took on a variety of roles in British and American productions. He appeared in Shine in 1996, the acclaimed biographical film about pianist David Helfgott, playing the younger version of the character before Geoffrey Rush took over for the adult scenes. The film won Rush the Academy Award and was one of the most successful Australian films of the decade, and Taylor's contribution to its early sections was an important part of establishing the character's emotional foundation. His role as Bryce in Lara Croft, Tomb Raider gave him a role that required a different kind of performance from his more dramatic earlier work. Bryce is comic, warm, and technically minded, providing both practical support and emotional grounding for Lara in a way that called for natural timing and genuine likability. Taylor brought both qualities to the role effortlessly. Like his Tomb Raider co-star Ian Glenn, he went on to appear in Game of Thrones, playing the disturbing and memorable character Locke, and his performance in that series introduced him to a new generation of viewers worldwide. Chris Berry. Chris Berry was born on March 28, 1960, in Hildesheim, West Germany, to British parents. He grew up in England and developed a talent for impressions and comic performance from an early age. He trained as an impressionist and worked in the world of comedy and light entertainment before finding his way into television. He became best known in Britain for his role as Arnold Rimmer in Red Dwarf, the beloved British science fiction comedy series that began in 1988 and has continued in various forms for decades. Rimmer is a petty, cowardly, self-important hologram, and Berry played him with a comic precision and physical commitment that made the character both hilarious and surprisingly sympathetic. The role became one of the defining comic performances in British television history, and earned Berry a devoted fanbase. He also starred in the British sitcom The British Empire throughout the early 1990s, playing another magnificently awful authority figure, the deeply incompetent and self-deluded leisure centre manager Gordon Brittas. The series was enormously popular and reinforced his reputation as one of Britain's finest comic performers. His role as Hilary the Butler in Lara Croft, Tomb Raider was a natural fit for his abilities, requiring the kind of perfectly timed comic dignity that he had spent years perfecting. Hilary is stuffy and proper and slightly bewildered by the chaos that surrounds Lara, and Berry played him with a warmth and precision that made every scene he was in slightly funnier and more grounded than it might otherwise have been. These are the lives of the people who brought Lara Croft, Tomb Raider to life on screen. Each of them arrived at that film from a completely different direction, carrying completely different histories, and each of them left it changed in some way by the experience. The film itself may be a product of a specific moment in Hollywood history, but the lives behind its performances are stories that stretch far beyond any single role or any single film. The making of Lara Croft, Tomb Raider, budget, production story and funny moments on set. How it all began, the long road to production. The story of how Lara Croft, Tomb Raider finally made it to cinema screens is almost as adventurous as the film itself. The idea of turning the Tomb Raider video game into a major Hollywood film had been floating around the industry for years before a single frame was ever shot. Lara Croft had been one of the most recognizable fictional characters on the planet since the mid-1990s, and everyone in Hollywood could see the obvious potential of bringing her to the big screen. The problem was that nobody could agree on how to do it, who should do it, or what the film should actually look like. The development process was long and genuinely chaotic. Multiple writers worked on versions of the script over a period of several years, and multiple directors were attached to the project at various points before anything concrete emerged. The studio had enormous commercial ambitions for the film but also enormous anxiety about getting it wrong. Lara Croft was not just a character. She was a brand, a cultural icon, and a symbol that millions of people around the world had strong personal feelings about. Getting her wrong would not simply mean a bad film. It would mean a public relations disaster of considerable scale. Stephen Herrick was the director originally hired to make the film. He went through the development process, worked on the project for a significant period, and then departed to direct Rockstar instead, leaving the production without a director at a relatively late stage. Simon West was brought in to replace him, and while the transition was managed professionally, it introduced additional pressure and uncertainty into an already complicated production environment. West was known for his work on Con Air and The General's Daughter, and his background in large-scale action filmmaking made him a logical choice for the material, but taking over a project mid-development is never a simple task. The screenplay went through numerous drafts and involved multiple writers at different stages. Patrick Massett and John Zimmern received the final screenplay credit, but the story had been worked on by Sarah B. Cooper, Mike Werb, and Michael Colleary before reaching that stage, and Simon West himself contributed to the adaptation. The script that eventually went into production was the product of years of work and considerable creative turbulence, and that history is reflected in certain structural elements of the finished film that feel slightly uneven in places. The budget, where the money went. The production budget for Lara Croft, Tomb Raider was $115 million, which in 2001 represented a very substantial investment. To understand what that number meant in context, it is worth remembering that $115 million in 2001 translates to considerably more than that in contemporary terms when adjusted for inflation. This was a major studio blockbuster receiving the full financial commitment that Paramount Pictures believed the material deserved and the global marketplace demanded. The largest single budget item, as is typically the case with action films of this scale, was the production itself. The practical costs of filming across multiple countries on 3 continents, building elaborate sets, employing hundreds of crew members, and maintaining a production of this complexity for the full duration of the shoot added up to an enormous sum. The decision to film at real locations rather than relying entirely on studio sets was both creatively valuable and financially significant. Shooting at Hatfield House in England, at the Ta Prohm Temple complex in Cambodia, and on the Vatnajökull Glacier in Iceland rather than building recreations of those environments in a studio added authenticity to the film but also added logistical complexity and cost at every location. The Cambodia shoot was particularly expensive in terms of logistics. Getting a major film production into the jungle surrounding the Angkor Wat archaeological site required extensive coordination with the Cambodian government and local authorities. The infrastructure needed to support a large film crew in a remote jungle environment, equipment, transportation, accommodation, catering, medical support, and communication systems, had to be largely created from scratch. The heat and humidity of the Cambodian jungle were relentless, and the physical demands on cast and crew were considerable. Every day of filming in that environment cost significantly more than a comparable day on a controlled studio set would have cost. The Iceland shoot brought entirely different challenges. The Vatnajökull Glacier is one of the largest glaciers in the world, and filming on it required specialized cold weather equipment, trained safety personnel, and constant monitoring of weather conditions that could change rapidly and dangerously. The equipment used in the film's Siberian sequences, including the vehicles, costumes, and set pieces, all had to be designed and constructed to function convincingly in genuinely extreme cold. The glacier sequences are visually stunning in the finished film, but that visual payoff came at a significant cost in terms of preparation, safety infrastructure, and daily operational expenses. The production design budget was enormous, reflecting the ambition of the film's visual language. The training arena inside Croft Manor, the elaborate hidden chamber sequences, the ancient temple interiors, and the futuristic ice structures all required the construction of large and complex physical sets. The production designer worked with a team of artists, craftspeople, and engineers to create environments that felt simultaneously ancient and extraordinary, and the quality of the finished sets is evident on screen. Building sets of that complexity and scale in multiple countries is an extraordinarily expensive undertaking. The visual effects budget was also substantial. While the film made extensive use of practical locations and physical sets, there were numerous sequences that required digital enhancement or creation. The robot in the opening training sequence, the more fantastical elements of the Triangle of Light's activation, and various other moments throughout the film required significant post-production work. Visual effects technology in 2001 was considerably more expensive and time-consuming than it would become in subsequent years, and the team working on Tomb Raider was pushing at the edges of what the technology could deliver at the time. Angelina Jolie's salary was a significant line item in the budget. She was, by 2001, a genuine star and an Academy Award winner, and her compensation reflected her status in the industry. Exact figures for individual actor salaries are rarely made public, but it is well documented that she was among the highest paid actresses in Hollywood at the time, and her fee for Tomb Raider was commensurate with that position. The studio understood that without her commitment and her performance, the entire enterprise would not work, and they paid accordingly. The marketing budget for the film was separate from the production budget and was itself enormous. Paramount invested heavily in the promotional campaign, commissioning extensive advertising across television, print, outdoor, and digital platforms. Jolie appeared in dozens of magazine features and interviews in the months leading up to release. The trailer was distributed widely and generated enormous online discussion at a time when internet film culture was still relatively new. The total marketing spend almost certainly added another significant sum on top of the $115 million production budget, making the total investment in the film well over $150 million by the time it reached theaters. The fact that the film grossed $274 million worldwide meant that it returned a solid profit, even accounting for both the production and marketing costs, the studio's share of theatrical revenues, and all the other expenses associated with releasing a major motion picture globally. It was commercially successful by any reasonable measure, and that success justified the investment and made a sequel inevitable. The physical preparation, Jolie's transformation. One of the most remarkable and extensively documented aspects of the production was the physical preparation that Angelina Jolie undertook to play Lara Croft. The character is not simply an action hero in the general sense. She is a specific and iconic figure with a very specific physical presence that fans of the video games knew intimately. Getting that physical representation right was critically important, and Jolie threw herself into the preparation with a totality that impressed everyone around her. She worked with a team of personal trainers for months before filming began, building muscle and physical capability in a systematic and scientific way. She gained approximately 13 pounds of muscle during the preparation period, a significant physical transformation that required enormous discipline in both training and diet. She trained twice a day in many periods, combining weight training with cardiovascular work, flexibility training, and the sport-specific skills required for the role. The weapons training was particularly extensive. Lara Croft's twin pistols are among the most iconic elements of the character's visual identity, and Jolie was determined that her handling of those weapons would look completely authentic and completely natural. She worked with weapons specialists for weeks, learning not just the basic mechanics of how to hold and fire the guns but the fluid, instinctive movements that would make the action sequences look genuinely impressive rather than merely competent. By the time filming began, she was genuinely proficient with the weapons, and that proficiency shows in the finished film. The bungee ballet sequence, which takes place during the mansion invasion, required a different kind of preparation. The sequence involves Jolie suspended on bungee cables from the ceiling of the mansion's grand atrium, fighting off attackers while swinging through the air with gymnastic precision. She worked with stunt coordinators and acrobatic specialists to develop the skills needed for the sequence, and while stunt doubles were used for some of the more extreme elements, Jolie performed a significant amount of the work herself. The sequence is one of the film's most visually inventive moments, and the commitment she brought to its preparation is a significant reason for its success. She also learned to ride motorcycles, to drive various vehicles at high speed, and to perform a range of combat techniques that drew from multiple martial arts traditions. The combination of all these skills created a physical performance that felt genuinely grounded and capable rather than simply choreographed, and the difference between those two things is entirely visible on screen. Filming in Cambodia, the adventure that happened off-screen. The Cambodia shoot produced some of the production's most remarkable behind-the-scenes stories, and several of them carry a genuine humor that reflects the spirit of the people involved. The Ta Prohm Temple Complex, where the Cambodian sequences were filmed, is genuinely extraordinary but also genuinely challenging as a filming environment. The jungle surrounding it is dense and full of life, which is beautiful from an aesthetic standpoint but somewhat less beautiful from a practical filmmaking standpoint. The heat was extreme and constant, regularly reaching temperatures that made sustained physical performance genuinely punishing. The humidity was equally relentless, affecting equipment, costumes, and human beings with complete democratic equality. Angelina Jolie reportedly dealt with the heat in Cambodia with a combination of humor and practicality that endeared her to the crew. On one particularly brutal day of filming, with temperatures making the physical work genuinely difficult, she was reportedly seen cooling herself down between takes with methods that the more formal members of the crew found somewhat unconventional but that the people who had to do the actual physical work found entirely sensible and rather funny. She was not precious about the conditions. She sweated through them like everyone else and found the humor in the shared misery. The jungle itself was a constant source of unexpected complications. Wildlife in the area around the temples is abundant, and the crew encountered various animals throughout the shoot that were not in the script and had not been consulted about their availability. Large insects in particular were a recurring feature of the Cambodia experience, and the reactions of various crew members to discovering members of the local insect population in their equipment cases, lunch boxes, and on one memorable occasion apparently in a very senior crew member's personal belongings, provided significant entertainment for everyone who witnessed those moments. The local population around the temple complex was understandably fascinated by the arrival of a major Hollywood production. The sight of Angelina Jolie moving through the ancient temple streets surrounded by cameras, crew, and equipment naturally attracted considerable attention, and managing the crowds while trying to film required constant creativity and occasional improvisation. Stories from the Cambodia shoot describe a production that was genuinely beloved by the local community, with Jolie in particular making a significant effort to connect with the people she encountered. An impulse that was entirely consistent with the humanitarian consciousness she was developing during this period of her life, and that would eventually lead her to adopt her son Maddox from Cambodia the following year. The robot and the director's Easter egg. One of the most charming behind-the-scenes stories from the production concerns the training robot in the opening sequence. The robot, which Lara battles and defeats in the film's opening minutes, needed a name for the production team to refer to it by during planning and filming. Someone, and accounts differ slightly on exactly who, decided that the robot should be named Simon, as a quiet tribute to director Simon West. The name stuck and eventually made it into the film itself, where it appears briefly on a display panel during the sequence. It is the kind of small, affectionate in-joke that productions sometimes create for their own amusement, never expecting it to be noticed by anyone outside the immediate team. Film fans discovered it, however, and it has since become one of the best-known and best-loved pieces of Tomb Raider trivia. The fact that the director essentially had a deadly combat robot named after him by his own crew is inherently amusing, and the story speaks to the warm and playful atmosphere that apparently characterized at least portions of the production. Simon West himself apparently found the tribute genuinely touching, which speaks well of the collaborative relationship he maintained with his crew throughout what was by any measure a demanding and complex production. Jon Voight and Angelina Jolie, the real story behind the scene. The casting of Jon Voight as Lord Richard Croft was one of the most discussed and debated decisions of the entire production. Voight is Angelina Jolie's real father, and their relationship at the time of filming was genuinely strained. They had been publicly estranged to varying degrees for years, and the decision to cast them as father and daughter in a story that is fundamentally about the emotional bond between those two specific family members was either a stroke of genius or a recipe for disaster, depending on your perspective. What actually happened on set when they filmed their single shared scene together has been described in various ways by various people close to the production. What is consistent across all accounts is that the emotional atmosphere around that day of filming was unlike any other day on the production. Everyone who was present was aware of the real-world dimension of what they were watching, and there was a collective understanding that something was happening on camera that went beyond the script. Jolie herself has spoken about the experience of filming with her father in terms that are characteristically direct and unsentimental. She acknowledged the strangeness of the situation, the emotional complexity of performing a scene about loss and love and longing with a person whose actual absence from her life had contributed to those exact feelings. Whether the filming provided any kind of personal catharsis or simply added another layer of professional challenge to an already demanding shoot is something only she truly knows. The humor in the situation, such as it was, apparently came in the form of the extraordinary professionalism with which both actors approached the day. They were, above everything else, professionals. Whatever was happening between them personally, they showed up, they did the work, and they delivered a scene that is genuinely moving. The crew who witnessed it reportedly found the contrast between the emotional intensity of the scene and the businesslike efficiency with which both actors approached the technical aspects of filming it quite striking, and perhaps slightly absurd in the way that all genuinely extreme situations become slightly absurd when looked at from a certain angle. Daniel Craig and the physics of being cold. The Siberia sequences were filmed partly on location in Iceland, specifically on the Vatnajökull Glacier, and partly on constructed sets designed to recreate the interior of the ancient ice structure. The glacier location shoot was memorable for a number of reasons, chief among them being the fact that it was extraordinarily, punishingly cold. Daniel Craig, who plays Alex West in the sequences set in Siberia, was reportedly among the more expressive members of the cast when it came to voicing his opinion about the temperature conditions on the glacier location. He is, by all accounts, not a person who hides his reactions to physical discomfort, and the glacier provided ample material for reaction. Stories from the Iceland shoot described Craig dealing with the cold with a combination of dark humor and stoic endurance that his colleagues found entertaining, particularly during the extended waiting periods between takes that are an inescapable feature of location filmmaking. The physical demands of filming in genuinely Arctic conditions while maintaining the level of athletic performance required for the action sequences in those scenes were considerable. The combination of extreme cold, heavy costumes, and the need to perform convincingly as someone engaged in a high-stakes physical confrontation tested everyone involved. Craig's approach to these challenges, apparently characterized by a dry and occasionally unprintable commentary on the experience, provided the kind of comic relief that extreme working conditions often generate in groups of people who are all suffering together. Bryce's trailer and Noah Taylor's world. Noah Taylor, who plays Bryce, Lara's eccentric technical assistant, apparently found considerable personal identification with his character that made the performance feel particularly natural and authentic. Bryce lives and works in a chaotic and technology-filled trailer on the grounds of Croft Manor, surrounded by equipment and screens and the organized disorder of a mind that works faster than the space around it can accommodate. Taylor's preparation for the role apparently involved a genuine immersion in the technical and digital world that Bryce inhabits, and stories from the production suggest that his trailer on set, the real one he used between takes rather than the fictional one built for the film, bore a certain resemblance to Bryce's on-screen environment that was not entirely coincidental. His genuine curiosity about technology and his naturally slightly chaotic personal organization style apparently created a version of Bryce that required very little performance in the conventional sense, because large parts of it were simply an amplification of qualities Taylor genuinely possessed. His chemistry with Jolie was reportedly warm and immediate, and the ease of their on-screen relationship reflects a genuine personal compatibility between the two actors that made their scenes together feel genuinely relaxed and natural rather than performed. In a film full of high-intensity sequences, the scenes between Lara and Bryce provide moments of genuine comedy and warmth that the film needs to balance its more extreme elements, and the naturalness of those scenes owes a great deal to the relationship between the two actors who created them. The audition that never was. Among the more entertaining behind-the-scenes stories associated with the Tomb Raider production is the account of the audition process for the role of Lara Croft, and the somewhat brutal experience of one particular actress who sought the part. Natalie Cassidy, a British actress who was at the time best known for her role in the long-running British soap opera EastEnders, reportedly auditioned for the role of Lara Croft and was, by her own later account, laughed out of the room. The story, which Cassidy has told publicly herself with considerable good humor, describes her arriving to audition and encountering a reaction from those present, allegedly including Jolie herself, that was immediate and unambiguous in its assessment of the match between the auditioner and the role. The laughter, by Cassidy's own telling, was genuine and not entirely unkind in its spirit, simply a spontaneous and uncontrollable reaction to a casting possibility that apparently struck everyone in the room simultaneously as entirely improbable. Cassidy has told the story as a comedy rather than a grievance, which speaks well of her sense of humor and her perspective, and it has become one of the better-known anecdotes from the Tomb Raider production. It also serves as a reminder that casting is a brutally direct business in which reactions are often immediate and instinctive, and that the gap between who gets a role and who does not is sometimes simply a matter of walking into a room. The twin pistols, a weight nobody appreciated. One of the details that emerged from behind-the-scenes accounts of the production concerns the practical reality of carrying Lara Croft's signature twin pistols throughout long days of filming. The prop weapons used in the film were constructed to look and feel as authentic as possible, which meant that they carried a realistic weight. Over the course of a 12 or 14-hour filming day, the cumulative weight of carrying 2 firearms in hip holsters, combined with the weight of the costume and the physical demands of the action sequences, adds up to something considerably more demanding than it looks on screen. Jolie apparently made no complaints about this, which was entirely consistent with her general approach to the physical demands of the role, but members of the crew who handled the prop weapons at the end of long shooting days reported being consistently surprised by how heavy they were and how much sustained effort carrying them throughout a full day of filming actually required. The fact that Jolie moved through those days with the ease and fluidity that the finished film demonstrates was, in the view of people who understood what it actually required, a genuine physical achievement. The Bungee Ballet, comedy in the air. The bungee ballet sequence in the Croft Manor atrium is one of the film's most visually distinctive moments, and the process of filming it was apparently one of the more technically complicated and occasionally absurd experiences of the entire production. The sequence required Jolie to be suspended on bungee cables from the ceiling of the set, fighting off attackers while swinging through the air in a way that looked simultaneously graceful and violent. The rehearsal process for the sequence was apparently rich in comic potential. The combination of bungee physics, which are inherently unpredictable and not entirely cooperative with the demands of choreographed action sequences, and the need to maintain a convincing fighting performance while suspended in mid-air created a situation in which even the best prepared participants occasionally ended up in positions that were more comic than graceful. Stories from the rehearsal period describe moments where the bungee cables behaved in ways that nobody had anticipated, depositing their occupant in unexpected locations or orientations that required significant self-control not to laugh at. Jolie's approach to these moments was apparently consistent with her general character. She found them funny, laughed at herself when the physics defeated her expectations, and then went back to trying again with complete determination. The willingness to be ridiculous in rehearsal in order to be extraordinary on camera is a quality that the best physical performers share, and her attitude during the preparation for this sequence was a good example of it. Simon West and the Art of Managing Chaos. Directing a film of this scale and complexity, on multiple continents, with a cast that included some of the most individually fascinating and in some cases personally complicated people in the film industry, required a particular kind of personality. Simon West was, by the accounts of people who worked with him on the production, well suited to the task. He maintained a calm and organized presence throughout a production that had numerous opportunities to become genuinely chaotic. He dealt with the logistical challenges of multi-country filming, the creative challenges of adapting a beloved character for the screen, and the interpersonal challenges of managing a large cast with strong individual personalities, all with a consistent professionalism that the crew appreciated enormously. His sense of humor was apparently a significant asset in maintaining the positive atmosphere on set, particularly during the more challenging periods of the shoot. His decision to name the training robot Simon was apparently typical of his approach to the production, finding moments of playfulness and self-awareness within the serious business of making a major studio film. It set a tone that filtered through the entire production, a recognition that the work was important and demanded full commitment, but that the best work is usually done by people who are enjoying themselves. That is the complete story of the budget, the making, and the funny and human moments behind Lara Croft, Tomb Raider. A film that cost $115 million, was made across 3 continents, tested the physical limits of almost everyone involved, generated enough behind-the-scenes stories for a film of its own, and somehow managed to remain an enjoyable and even affectionate experience for the people who made it, despite all the pressure and complexity that surrounded it. Lara Croft, Tomb Raider, the cultural and historical story behind the film. Where it all begins, the historical context of the early 2000s. To truly understand what Lara Croft, Tomb Raider meant when it arrived in cinemas in June of 2001, you have to understand the world it arrived into. The early 2000s were a specific and fascinating cultural moment, a period of transition and transformation in almost every dimension of popular culture, technology, entertainment, and social life. The world was changing rapidly, and the entertainment industry was changing with it, sometimes leading the change and sometimes struggling to keep up with it. The late 1990s had seen an explosion in the cultural reach and significance of video games as a medium. What had begun in the 1970s and 1980s as a niche hobby associated primarily with young men sitting alone in dark rooms had evolved by the late 1990s into one of the most commercially significant entertainment industries on the planet. Games were generating billions of dollars annually. Game characters were appearing on merchandise, in advertising campaigns, and in mainstream cultural conversations. And Lara Croft was at the absolute center of that transformation. When Core Design introduced Lara Croft in the original Tomb Raider game in 1996, they created something that the industry had never quite seen before. She was not the first female protagonist in a video game, but she was the first to achieve genuine mass cultural recognition. She was on the cover of mainstream magazines that had never previously paid serious attention to video game characters. She was used in advertising campaigns for products that had nothing to do with gaming. She was discussed in academic papers about gender representation and popular culture. She was simultaneously a commercial property of enormous value and a genuinely significant cultural symbol, and the tension between those two things was part of what made her so interesting and so discussed. By the time the film was made, Lara Croft had been a global cultural phenomenon for 5 years. Multiple generations of the Tomb Raider game series had been released and had sold millions of copies worldwide. The character had been refined and developed across those games, accumulating a mythology and a fan community of extraordinary devotion and size. Bringing her to the cinema screen was not simply a commercial decision. It was a cultural event, and everyone involved understood the weight of that. The video game adaptation problem, a historical curse. One of the most important historical contexts for understanding Lara Croft, Tomb Raider, is the history of video game adaptations in Hollywood up to that point. That history was, to put it gently, not encouraging. The track record of films based on video games before Tomb Raider was almost uniformly poor, and several of those failures had been genuinely spectacular in their awfulness. Super Mario Bros. In 1993 had been one of the most eagerly anticipated video game adaptations ever made and had turned out to be one of the most bewildering and incoherent films of the decade. Street Fighter in 1994 had failed to capture anything meaningful about the game that inspired it, and had become famous primarily as a symbol of how badly things can go wrong when commercial calculation replaces creative judgment. Mortal Kombat in 1995 had been slightly more successful commercially but was still far from a critical vindication of the video game adaptation concept. Double Dragon, Wing Commander, and various other attempts had come and gone, leaving behind a growing consensus in both the critical and gaming communities that video game stories simply did not translate to cinema in any meaningful or satisfying way. This historical context is important because it shaped the environment in which Tomb Raider was received. When the film was announced, there was significant skepticism about whether it could break the curse that seemed to hang over the entire genre. The stakes were particularly high because Lara Croft was such a beloved and recognized character. A bad Tomb Raider film would not simply be another failed video game adaptation. It would be a desecration of something that millions of people genuinely cared about. The fact that the film performed as well as it did commercially, and that Angelina Jolie's performance was as widely praised as it was, represented a genuine step forward for the genre even if the critical reception to the film as a whole was mixed. Tomb Raider demonstrated that a video game adaptation could work as a major commercial event and could produce performances of genuine quality. It did not solve all the problems of the genre, but it made the conversation about those problems more nuanced and more interesting. Lara Croft as a feminist icon, the cultural debate. Perhaps the most significant and enduring cultural conversation generated by Lara Croft as a character, both in her video game form and in her cinematic incarnation, concerns her relationship to feminism and female representation. This is a debate that began almost as soon as the character was created and that has continued with remarkable intensity and sophistication for 30 years. On one side of the debate are those who argue that Lara Croft represents a genuinely progressive step forward in female representation in popular culture. She is intelligent, capable, physically extraordinary, financially independent, and entirely self-determined. She does not need to be rescued. She does not define herself in relation to men. She pursues her own goals for her own reasons with absolute confidence and competence. In a cultural landscape full of female characters defined primarily by their relationships to male protagonists, Lara Croft was something genuinely different. She was the protagonist. The story was hers. The agency was hers. The victory was hers. On the other side of the debate are those who argue that whatever progressive qualities the character possesses are compromised or undermined by the overtly sexualized way in which she has been depicted throughout her history. The original video game character was designed with physical proportions that were deliberately exaggerated beyond anything remotely realistic, and the tight-fitting outfits and physical emphasis of her depiction across games, marketing materials, and the film itself were clearly designed with a male gaze in mind. The argument is that a female character who exists in an overtly sexualized visual form, regardless of how capable and independent she might be in terms of narrative, is ultimately still a product designed for male consumption, and that the apparent progressiveness of her character is therefore at least partially illusory. The film engaged with this tension in interesting ways, mostly through the performance of Angelina Jolie. Jolie brought to the character a quality of self-possession and intelligence that transcended the visual packaging of the role. She inhabited Lara Croft with such complete conviction and authority that the character felt genuinely powerful rather than simply decorative. Her performance argued, more eloquently than any piece of cultural criticism could, that a female character can be both visually striking and genuinely substantive, and that the sexualization of her appearance does not necessarily negate the significance of her agency and capability. This debate was happening in a specific cultural moment that gave it particular resonance. The early 2000s were a period of significant and ongoing conversation about the representation of women in popular culture, and Lara Croft, Tomb Raider landed right in the middle of that conversation. The film was discussed not just as a piece of entertainment but as a cultural statement, and different people read that statement in dramatically different ways depending on what they brought to the viewing experience. The Illuminati: History Behind the Villain. The choice of the Illuminati as the villainous organization in Tomb Raider is culturally and historically significant in ways that go well beyond the immediate needs of the plot. The Illuminati is not simply a fictional invention. It has a real historical basis, and the cultural mythology surrounding it has been one of the most persistent and fascinating threads in Western conspiracy thinking for more than 2 centuries. The historical Illuminati was founded in Bavaria in 1776 by a university professor named Adam Weishaupt. It was a secret society of Enlightenment thinkers who sought to combat superstition, religious influence over public life, and what they saw as the abuses of state power. The original organization had a relatively short existence, being suppressed by the Bavarian government in 1785, but the idea of a secret society of powerful individuals working behind the scenes to control world events proved to be an extraordinarily durable and powerful cultural concept. Over the following 2 centuries, the Illuminati became the template for an enormous range of conspiracy theories, fictional narratives, and cultural products. Every generation seemed to find new reasons to be fascinated by the idea of a hidden organization pulling strings behind the visible surface of politics, finance, and history. By the time Tomb Raider used them as its villains in 2001, the Illuminati had already appeared in dozens of novels, films, and television programs, and their cultural footprint was enormous. The film's use of the Illuminati as the group seeking the Triangle of Light tapped into this rich vein of cultural anxiety about hidden power and the manipulation of history. The idea that the world's most powerful people are not the ones we can see, that the real decisions are made in secret by a group accountable to no one, is a fear that runs very deep in modern democratic societies, and the Illuminati have become the most recognizable symbol of that fear. Using them as the antagonists gave the film an instant resonance with audiences who had absorbed this cultural mythology through countless previous encounters with it in various forms. Ancient Civilizations and the Archaeology of Imagination. The film's engagement with ancient civilizations and archaeological history draws on a long tradition in popular culture of using the past as a source of mystery, power, and danger. The concept of an artifact left behind by an ancient civilization that possesses extraordinary power is one of the most enduring and widespread tropes in adventure storytelling, and Tomb Raider uses it with considerable skill and awareness. The Triangle of Light as a concept draws on real historical and mythological traditions surrounding powerful artifacts and the civilizations that created them. Almost every major ancient culture has legends about objects of extraordinary power, items that could heal, destroy, control natural forces, or grant their possessor abilities beyond the ordinary. The Ark of the Covenant in Judeo-Christian tradition, the Holy Grail in Christian mythology, the Philosopher's Stone in alchemical tradition, and countless similar objects in Greek, Egyptian, Mesopotamian, Hindu, and other mythological systems all speak to the same deep human fascination with the idea that somewhere in the world, hidden away, there exists something that could change everything. The specific power attributed to the Triangle of Light, the ability to control time, connects to one of the most fundamental human desires and one of the most universal sources of grief. The inability to change the past, to undo losses, to correct mistakes, is something that every human being experiences and that most human beings, if honest, would give almost anything to alter. The film understands this and uses it not just as a plot mechanism but as an emotional foundation for Lara's story. The temptation of the triangle is not abstract. It is the most specific and personal temptation imaginable, the chance to bring back someone she loved and lost, and the choice she makes when offered that temptation is therefore a genuinely meaningful statement about human values and human strength. The locations chosen for the film, Cambodia and Iceland, are historically rich and culturally significant in ways that add depth to the visual storytelling. The Angkor Wat complex in Cambodia is one of the most extraordinary archaeological sites on Earth, a monument to the Khmer civilization that flourished from the 9th to the 15th centuries and produced architectural achievements of staggering ambition and technical sophistication. The Ta Prohm Temple, where much of the Cambodia sequence was filmed, is particularly resonant because it has been deliberately left in a state that shows the relationship between human construction and natural reclamation, with enormous tree roots woven through the stone structures in a way that makes the boundary between the built and the natural world genuinely ambiguous. Iceland, with its volcanic landscapes, ancient glaciers, and deep roots in Norse mythology and saga culture, provides a completely different kind of historical and cultural resonance. The Norse tradition is full of stories about hidden treasures, ancient powers, and the relationship between the human world and forces that exist beyond ordinary comprehension, and the glacial Siberian setting of the film's second location sequence connects, even if loosely, to that tradition of northern mystery and ancient power. The planetary alignment, science, mythology, and cultural fear. The central plot device of the film, the rare planetary alignment that activates the triangle of light, draws on a genuinely ancient tradition of human fascination with celestial events and their supposed connection to earthly power and destiny. Astronomical events have been interpreted as omens, as activators of divine or supernatural forces, and as windows of extraordinary possibility or danger by cultures across the entire span of recorded human history. Solar eclipses in particular have been among the most powerful and frightening astronomical phenomena in virtually every human culture that has encountered them. Before the development of modern astronomy, and the ability to predict and explain celestial mechanics, a solar eclipse was a genuinely terrifying event. The disappearance of the sun in the middle of the day, accompanied by the strange quality of the light and the behavior of animals responding to the sudden darkness, was interpreted in ancient cultures as a sign of divine anger, as a moment of cosmic vulnerability, or as a window during which the normal rules of the world were temporarily suspended. The film uses this deeply embedded cultural association to give its central premise an emotional and psychological weight that it would not otherwise possess. When the planetary alignment activates the triangle, it is not simply a plot convenience. It is drawing on thousands of years of human belief that celestial events correspond to terrestrial ones, that what happens in the sky above us has consequences for the world we live in. That belief is ancient, persistent, and deeply rooted, and the film touches it skillfully. The British aristocratic tradition and Lara's cultural identity. Lara Croft's identity as a British aristocrat is not incidental to her character. It is central to it, and it connects to a very specific cultural tradition that has enormous resonance in the history of adventure and exploration. The figure of the wealthy, educated British individual who travels the world in search of knowledge, adventure, and artifacts is one of the defining archetypes of a particular historical era, the age of empire and exploration that stretched roughly from the 17th century through the early 20th. The great British explorers, archaeologists, and adventurers of that era, figures like Richard Francis Burton, Charles Doughty, Gertrude Bell, Howard Carter, and many others, came primarily from privileged backgrounds that gave them the resources, the education, and the social permission to pursue their extraordinary careers. They combined intellectual curiosity with physical courage, linguistic ability with cultural sensitivity, and they moved through the world with a confidence born of their social position and their exceptional individual capabilities. Lara Croft is clearly a descendant of this tradition, both literally through her aristocratic lineage and culturally through her role as a tomb raider and collector of ancient artifacts. She has the resources to pursue her adventures because of her family's wealth. She has the intellectual foundation for her work because of her education. She moves through the world's most remote and dangerous places with the confidence of someone who has never been told there is anywhere she cannot go, or anything she cannot achieve. The film is aware of this heritage and treats it with a certain affectionate knowingness. Croft Manor, with its extraordinary collection of artifacts from dozens of cultures and centuries, is a very specific cultural image. It recalls the great country houses of Victorian and Edwardian Britain, many of which contained collections assembled by family members who had traveled the world during the Age of Empire and brought back whatever caught their eye. The ethical questions surrounding those collections, questions about ownership, cultural patrimony, and the legacies of colonialism, are not something the film addresses directly, but they exist as a cultural subtext that informed, and to some extent complicated, the reception of the character in different parts of the world. James Bond and the adventure tradition. One of the most important cultural contexts for understanding Lara Croft, Tomb Raider, is the tradition of the James Bond films, which were explicitly acknowledged as one of the primary inspirations for the Tomb Raider video game series itself. The Bond films, which began with Dr. No in 1962, established a template for the globe-trotting action-adventure film that has influenced virtually every subsequent film in the genre. The Bond formula involves a highly capable protagonist with a specific skill set moving through exotic international locations, confronting a villain with world domination ambitions, navigating complex personal relationships, and ultimately saving civilization through a combination of intelligence, physical ability, and sheer force of personality. Tomb Raider draws directly and knowingly on this formula, updating it, complicating it, and most significantly changing the gender of the protagonist at its center. The fact that Daniel Craig, who plays Alex West in Tomb Raider, would go on 5 years later to become James Bond himself adds a retrospective layer of cultural resonance to the film that is genuinely fascinating. In Tomb Raider, Craig plays a secondary character in a story centered on a female protagonist who in many ways represents a more progressive and contemporary version of the archetype Bond embodies. 5 years later, he would take on that archetype himself, bringing to it many of the same qualities of physical intensity and psychological depth that he demonstrated in his Tomb Raider performance. The connection between the two films and the two characters is not simply a piece of casting trivia. It speaks to the shared cultural DNA of the adventure film tradition and to the way in which individual actors carry that tradition forward through their bodies of work. The impact on female action heroes in Hollywood. The cultural and historical significance of Lara Croft, Tomb Raider in terms of its impact on the representation of women in Hollywood action cinema is difficult to overstate. When the film was released in June 2001, there were very few examples of female-led action blockbusters in Hollywood history. The genre of the action film had been, with very rare exceptions, almost exclusively male-centered since its establishment in the late 1970s and 1980s. Ripley in the Alien films, beginning in 1979, was one of the earliest and most influential examples of a female action protagonist in major studio cinema, and her cultural impact was enormous. Sarah Connor in the Terminator films, beginning in 1984 and developing powerfully in Terminator 2 in 1991, was another landmark. But these examples were exceptions in a genre that was otherwise dominated by male protagonists of various kinds, and neither of them had led a film to the kind of global box office success that Tomb Raider achieved. The commercial success of Tomb Raider changed the conversation in Hollywood in a meaningful way. It demonstrated in the most concrete terms available, box office numbers, that a film centered on a female action hero could compete at the highest level of the global marketplace. It showed studios that female-led action films were not a niche proposition but a genuine commercial opportunity, and that the global audience for entertainment had no problem accepting, and indeed enthusiastically embracing, a woman as the central figure in a story of physical action and adventure. The films that followed in the years after Tomb Raider, including Resident Evil in 2002, Kill Bill in 2003, Mr. and Mrs. Smith in 2005, Salt in 2010, and eventually the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe's development of Black Widow and other female characters, all exist in the landscape that Tomb Raider helped to create. The conversation about female representation in action cinema that was advanced by Jolie's performance in Tomb Raider is one that continues to this day, and that has produced an increasingly rich and diverse range of female action protagonists across global cinema. The Ancient Temples of Cambodia, a Nation and Its History. The decision to film in Cambodia at the Angkor Wat complex was not simply a visual choice. It was a choice with significant cultural and historical dimensions that deserved to be understood and appreciated. Cambodia in 2001 was a country still carrying the devastating weight of one of the 20th century's worst human catastrophes. The Khmer Rouge regime, which ruled Cambodia from 1975 to 1979, had been responsible for the deaths of somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million people, representing a significant percentage of the entire Cambodian population. The trauma of that period had shaped every aspect of Cambodian society, culture, and psychology in the decades that followed. The Angkor Wat complex, including the Tháp Prom temple where the film was shot, is the most important symbol of Cambodian national identity and cultural pride. It represents the extraordinary achievement of the Khmer civilization at its height, a civilization that produced architectural and engineering work of a quality that astonishes scholars to this day. For Cambodians, Angkor Wat is not simply a tourist attraction or a film location. It is the physical embodiment of a national identity and a cultural heritage that survived even the devastation of the Khmer Rouge. The presence of a major Hollywood production at Tháp Prom in 2001, and the global exposure that the film brought to the site and to Cambodia more broadly, had genuine positive effects for the country's tourism industry and international profile. And the personal connection that Angelina Jolie formed with Cambodia during the shoot, which led directly to her adoption of Maddox the following year and to decades of humanitarian engagement with the country, represents one of the most meaningful and lasting cultural legacies of the production. The music, cultural crossroads and sound. The soundtrack of Lara Croft, Tomb Raider is itself a cultural document of considerable interest. The film combined an orchestral score by Graham Revell with a selection of popular music tracks that reflected the cultural moment of early 2001 in very specific ways. Artists including Missy Elliott, Outkast, U2, Leftfield, and Basement Jaxx contributed to the soundtrack, creating a musical landscape that sat at the intersection of multiple cultural streams. The choice to blend orchestral action music with contemporary popular tracks from across multiple genres spoke to the film's ambition to be culturally inclusive and current in a way that traditional adventure film scores had not always been. It positioned the film at a crossroads between the classical adventure tradition, represented by the orchestral score, and the contemporary cultural moment, represented by the popular music selections. The result was a soundtrack that felt genuinely of its time in a way that has made it an interesting cultural artifact of that specific period, a sonic portrait of where popular culture stood in the summer of 2001. The legacy and ongoing cultural conversation. More than 2 decades after its release, Lara Croft, Tomb Raider continues to generate cultural conversation and critical reassessment. Films that arrive at significant cultural moments often become more interesting over time rather than less, as the distance of years allows audiences and critics to see more clearly what the film was doing in its own moment, and what it contributed to the larger story of cinema and culture. The debates about female representation that Lara Croft sparked have become richer and more sophisticated over the years. The questions about cultural appropriation and archaeological ethics that the film touches on, if not always directly addresses, have become more prominent in cultural discourse. The historical significance of a female action hero opening at number 1 at the global box office in the summer of 2001, in the era before the normalization of female-led blockbusters that has gradually occurred in subsequent decades, looks more significant rather than less with the benefit of hindsight. The film also exists now in the context of a franchise that has been rebooted and reimagined multiple times since 2001, with a new approach to the Tomb Raider story taking Lara Croft in significantly different directions in both the video games and in the 2018 Alicia Vikander film. Comparing those different versions of the character across different cultural moments is itself a fascinating exercise in understanding how popular culture reflects and responds to changing social values and expectations. Lara Croft, Tomb Raider is a film that belongs to its moment in a way that very few films achieve. It could only have been made when it was made, with the cultural forces that shaped it, and the social and historical environment that produced it. That specificity is part of what makes it culturally significant, and it is why the film continues to reward serious attention more than 2 decades after its original release. That is the complete cultural and historical story of Lara Croft, Tomb Raider. A film that arrived at a specific and fascinating cultural moment, drew on thousands of years of human history and mythology, changed the conversation about female representation in Hollywood, connected to real and significant places and histories around the world, and left a legacy that continues to shape the way we think about adventure stories and the women who tell them.